Join me in standing for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Father, we thank you for the day. We thank you for the beauty of it. Thank you for the beautiful place where we get to serve. Help us to be good stewards of what you've put before us. Guide our conversations and discussions and decisions as we go forward tonight. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Nicole, roll call.
Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Popson.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. First item is citizens' comments.
Randy Bowell.
Fence in front of my trash can, so I wouldn't get in trouble up here.
I don't think the mic's working, Randy.
Hello?
Works fine.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the proposed noise ordinance and realizing that it's probably not going to be action, but regardless. With reference to Ms. Hack's letter submitted to citizens' comments, her comment, the proposed ordinance impacts Wild Dunes Resort and its ability to do business, and this decision will undoubtedly impact the city's accommodation tax revenue. I'd like to reference the City Council meeting of 5/22/2018, at which time Dan Batista and Frank Fredericks stood before this council and addressed the public and recognized the city's concerns, including parking, traffic noise, and associated other impacts of a new planned hotel. Director Carr advised that absent any specific zoning for the PRD, that the city's zoning laws would apply to that hotel. Beginning at the 46:30 mark of the council video, Mr. Frederick stated, "The rooftop is primarily directed at wedding events. The party activity will be indoors, with only the wedding ceremony taking place outdoors." He also commented that the resort would abide by the city's noise ordinance. Interesting, given today's conversation. So Ms. Hack should take note of any discussion of changes to the city code. The Sweetgrass Inn was built eyes wide open. Full discussion with this council. We have a noise ordinance. The resort was fully aware. I stated publicly at the time, and I'll restate it again, I've yet to meet a resident that wants that hotel. You know, we didn't want it before it was built. It's a nuisance. It's traffic, parking. There's no compliance to the parking along Palm Boulevard that was not to be employee parking. They park wherever they wish as the employees come in. As for the ATAX money, the percentage of ATAX money that we get from her purported over $900,000 to the city, frankly, is a pittance compared to what we get to deal with an increasingly high population at Wild Dunes. So no exception should be made to any ordinance allowing intrusion into residential quality of life. Livability as defined in the city's strategic plan will remain a top priority in any residents' first election platform. For those wishing to retain council seats and to anyone wishing to run, actions will speak louder than words. The council managed to pass 5 ordinances serving the residential community and quality of life, yet it took a boisterous voting public to achieve that passage. Short-term rentals, noise, land conservation, beach renourishment, parking. You now have a voting public paying very much attention to these issues. Thank you.
Christine Donovan.
Okay, good evening. There we go. I am here to present the very strong and compelling voices of many residents, including many longtime residents like myself, who have signed this petition asking you to take action to prevent our island being overwhelmed by short-term rentals. Most of the supporters are not against short-term rentals. We only want to maintain a balanced community. The ordinance proposed does not restrict full-time residents like myself from renting their homes up to 72 days per year, and it does allow for the transfer of a license to an eligible family member. It simply limits investment short-term rental licenses to 1,600, which amounts to 35% of our dwellings. To date, we've collected 1,173 signatures of residents who are registered to vote on the Isle of Palms. This number represents more than 30% of our current eligible voters and nearly double the percentage of signatures needed to require you to adopt the ordinance or put it to a voter referendum. For perspective, this number exceeds the number of votes received by 7 of you when you were elected to your current position. Though volunteers did not yet reach all neighborhoods, the number of STR license applications already this year necessitated early submission. Again, we have 1,173 signatures. This is 70% more than the amount required by the Charleston County Election Board. It's crucial to clarify that we support short-term rentals. We enjoy meeting vacationing families. We value the tax revenue generated, and we love our local businesses and want them to maintain their current level of commercial activity. We are not asking for change. Our objective is simple: to maintain the community's balance through strategic management. While we value short-term rentals, we can't ignore the potential risk of them overwhelming our neighborhoods, infrastructure, or resources. If it's true, as some argue, that we have no current or future problems, then this limit will never be a concern. However, many of us believe that inaction in the face of the changing landscape of our state and nearby communities risks rapid commercialization of our island. Will it happen? No one knows. What we do know is that currently no preventative mechanisms are in place. Okay, so I kindly request that the city promptly consider adoption of this ordinance. We have confirmed that the signatures are valid. You are welcome to submit it to the Charleston County Board of Election. If you are unwilling to adopt this ordinance quickly, we request that you take all steps necessary to have this placed on the November ballot. I firmly believe that each of you is truly committed to listening to and supporting the residents of this island, as well as island businesses. Thank you for your ongoing efforts to gather the facts and listen to the voices of residents.
Laura Levins. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, sorry. Good evening. I moved here just shy of 3 years ago after living my entire life in urban cities all over the United States. I had never lived in a place with this type of diversity of land and ocean, and I wanted to find out more about my new home. I was drawn to become part of the Audubon Shorebird Steward Program, as well as the IOP Turtle Team. Then I enrolled in a 13-week Coastal Master Naturalist course last year to dive into the discovery process even further. One of our classes last October was at the SCDNR Marine Resources Center in Port Johnson, where we learned about coastal evolution and geology. Our South Carolina coastline and barrier islands were formed about 4,500 years ago. There has been a constant ebb and flow of accretion and erosion since then, but it's only been in the past several hundred years that there were structures on our coastline that could be negatively impacted by what our ocean waves and sand do naturally. I would like to strongly recommend that the IOP City Council develop a plan to implement a beach renourishment project for the current affected area between 100 and 500 Ocean Boulevard. Hard erosion control structures are not the solution. Hard erosion structures such as seawalls, riprap, and sandbags exacerbate erosion and contribute to the loss of public access and wildlife habitat for foraging and nesting shorebirds and turtles. They can also negatively impact adjacent properties or beaches. When the South Carolina Beachfront Management Act was created in 1988, it included a prohibition on new hard erosion control structures because of the negative impacts they have to beaches, and also because they do not prove to be effective. They went on to establish 8 state policies to guide the management of our beaches, the most important provision being to severely restrict the use of hard erosion control devices to armor the beach and dune system, and to encourage the replacement of hard erosion control devices with soft technologies as approved by the department. This provision is based on very clear science. If hard erosion control structures are implemented on IOP, there will be no beach. For human enjoyment or for our threatened and endangered wildlife who rely on our beaches to try to keep their species from extinction. It is my understanding that Senator Campson has submitted a letter to Council stating that state funding could be made available for a beach renourishment project. It would be in everyone's best interest to take him up on this wonderful offer. The erosion in the 100 to 500 Ocean Boulevard area must be addressed and managed to protect private properties. This council should take up and move forward with the renourishment option so that we are in compliance with our IOP comprehensive plan to support renourishment, and more importantly, so that our community keeps with the integrity of why state laws regarding renourishment exist. Thank you.
Meredith Jorgensen. If I could ask Ms. Jorgensen and the rest of the speakers to please state your address as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Meredith Jorgensen, and I live at 116 Ocean Boulevard. I am concerned about the dramatic erosion and complete destruction of the dunes that we've experienced at the south end of Isle of Palms. I would like to share 4 points with you today. In mid-May of this year, we watched all of the dunes in front of our property just collapse into the ocean. It didn't stop there. It ate up 20 more feet of our property and literally ripped our walkway into the ocean. Concerning, to say the least. Other homeowners have lost much more. Look at Curtis K. at 204 Ocean. He lost 53 feet of his property in 8 weeks. These dunes are our last line of defense on this island. As Mary Pringle from the Turtle Team shared in her letter to the city, there are no turtles south of 6th Street because there are literally no dunes for the turtles to nest in. And most of the south end of the beach is impassable by humans at high tide. Second, Isle of Palms is a public beach for many to enjoy. Most of the people on this end of the beach are public visitors, not homeowners. The public access points have been severely damaged and look like cliffs as beachgoers have to jump down almost 6 feet at some points just to get to the beach. One access point has installed a rope so that beachgoers can lift themselves up off the beach. Not a safe environment for anyone. Third, we need your help as soon as possible. With hurricane season already active, homeowners such as myself fear catastrophic damage to our property if nothing else is done by the City of Isle of Palms in the short term. I understand the City of Isle of Palms has specific funds for tax dollars that is intended for beach renourishment, which is exactly what we desperately need on the south end of Isle of Palms. I also understand the city funded a major dredging and renourishment project at Wild Dunes, which is a private beach. Again, Isle of Palms is a public beach. We do not have an HOA, and we absolutely need public assistance to fix this dramatic rapid destruction of our beach. Fourth, as I looked over the agenda today for the town's council meeting for a solution to this devastating problem was provided by Coastal Science Engineering Group, which is actually confusing because they are named as a defendant in a lawsuit with Pawleys Island for similar rapid erosion problems. CSE is financially motivated to disassociate with the Wild Dunes project with the destruction and rapid erosion we are experiencing on the south end of Isle of Palms. So why are we taking their advice on next steps here at Isle of Palms? The city should find independent sources and use the tax dollars that are intended for this fund to re-nourish our beaches. So I strongly urge you to vote yes today and fund to save our beaches. Thank you.
Brian Duffy.
Brian Duffy, 3613 Waterway Boulevard. Good evening, Council. It has been some time since I've been in front of you. At the February meeting, if you remember, I talked about data and due diligence. It was also at that meeting that the residents of this community were called a mob twice, all for being engaged citizens. It was sad and has no place in this chamber nor in this community. It pains me to consider that such uncivil, demeaning, and bullying behavior occurred in this chamber. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. The main reason I'm here, speaking as president of Preserve IOP Now, is to thank all the neighbors who participated in the petition. Those who collected signatures, taking time from their busy schedules to engage with neighbors to discuss the referendum, its purpose, its impacts. And thanks to the neighbors who took their time to understand the referendum, ask insightful questions. Where am I? And to understand the referendum. And of course, for signing the petition. I wish I had a recorder for all the stories I heard from the folks who have been on the island for 50 and 60 years, and from the ones who were born and raised on the island. They have lived the island's history and know what it means to be a residential island. The number of times we heard, "Thanks for what you're doing," was astounding. Just to let you know, there were many, many people who support the referendum but wish to remain anonymous. They had concerns about retaliation against their businesses. Who can blame them with the amount of bad behavior, vitriol spewed in public and online? So, we have 3 requests of council. First, considering what has been said about bullying and bad behavior and vitriol, please consider the request for redaction that was submitted with the petition. Second, we are requesting a council member make a motion to schedule a special council meeting to consider the petition and attached referendum. It would provide your constituents a sense of where you stand on the issue. Lastly, we never expect to have a fire, but we carry fire insurance just the same. All we are asking you, as prudent stewards, is to consider this as island insurance. Thank you.
Mr. Klaus.
Al Klaus, 3 Grand Pavilion, 16th presentation commencing 4/13 of 22. Requesting for the 10th time to provide us written assurances regarding enforcement of Section 925 B and C, amplified music. Lack of enforcement has resulted into a nuisance. Regarding our request for Mrs. Anderson's recusal, we will be interested in her update, and we would like to know if she is being consistent in her actions as compared to her previous recusal. We are looking for full transparency. Our history. In July of 21, we started calling complaints to the police department regarding the noise violations perpetrated by the Sweetgrass Inn, day and night. No results. April 7 of 22, presented to Public Safety Committee. Mrs. Anderson stated, quote, "We will get back to you." She never did. Presented to City Council August 23rd of 2022, Councilman Pierce, Bulgosin, and Ward reached out to us immediately to address our concerns, understand our situation, site visits. No citations were issued until November the 4th of 22. That was the concert from hell. 5 were issued in one night. Well, it was. During the above timelines, due diligence revealed the resort's management convinced administration, absent any clinical proof, that Al Klaus is, quote, unreasonable. Exposed IOP off-duty police who were working events at Sweetgrass, placing them in harm's way to potential conflicts of interest, bad optics. Our FOIA request exposed a false narrative from the resort's legal counsel regarding our character. Valerie Krause, no relation, a lifetime medical professional, provided information regarding WHO and NIH guidelines for decibel levels, all ignored. The administration provided OSHA numbers, which are for construction zones. Again, we are not the Windjammer, a commercial property located in a commercially zoned area. Again, we are unwelcome beneficiaries of an egregious hotel which is located adjacent to a residential neighborhood, who play by their rules, not complying with the noise ordinance, and getting away with it. Amplified music, amplified music, amplified music. Had the noise violations been enforced from the start, we would not be here today. But no, we let it go and go and go. Our administration, looking for ways to not enforce, did not hit this situation head on. We believe sustainable livability in this community will not be defined or derived from tax dollars.
Mr.
Thank you.
Roth, thank you. Glenda Nemus.
I think she's in the hallway.
She's here.
She's outside.
Yeah.
Ms. Nemus.
I saw her at the door.
Good evening. My name is Glenda Nemus, and I am a full-time resident here on the island. Tonight, I speak about residents' needs, tax money, and beach management and mitigation. Now, I know a thing or two about these topics, as I have lived it for 30 years. In 1992, we bought our first barrier island home on the ocean front in South Carolina. It was on the critical line. Our porch was. We studied the erosion issue, we measured our risk factors, we read about natural movement of sand down the coastline, and educated ourselves about beach management programs. Then we watched our front beach erode and accrete with the seasons and years. Our home had high tides often coming up to the deck post. We worked on our ocean front to put up sand fences, plant dune holding vegetation, and more, and we were rewarded with help from continuous beach management and mitigation programs with a protective dune. We did get hit with hurricanes, Irma and Matthew, and yes, the dune relocated to the street behind our house during that event. Afterwards, the town moved the sand from the street and replaced it back, and a berm was built. No insurance claims were filed, and we again continue to work with our constantly changing oceanfront. The town never wavered in its renourishment support in those years. And for those years, we protected our fragile dunes with actions and protected the municipality from lawsuits by reporting dangerous escarpments at the beach, accesses, and unsafe activity on the beach hand. The right hand helped the left hand. We collected thousands of dollars in tax money from our property for government use and paid a high rate of property taxes and insurance. There was free usage of our property above the mean high tide mark for years, despite our personal risk for liability. We gave to the public beach and the community as much or more than we received back as homeowners. We paid highly for the privilege to use our well-maintained home to collect those aid taxes and let the public use part of our oceanfront property. Now, the reason I tell you this is because I support renourishment programs, obviously, and I support the people on the Breach Inlet end of the island who are asking for help at this point. Now, there are 5 reasons that I can think of that we really should support the beach restoration projects now and take care of that. One is that no one would buy houses on the ocean front if there weren't programs to help with situations such as this. It would be too risky. 2 is that historically we've had to deal with the development that, yes, is not good for the beach. It would be nice if we could just let nature take its course, but we are now in a situation that we live alongside this water and we are intertwined with what happens. Third, we don't want IOP to be another story on the news like so many other oceanfront communities, especially for homes falling in the ocean and beaches disappearing from use. We've already had enough negative press recently: shark bites, shootings, drug arrests, massive traffic problems, police chief shooting, marina discord, quality of life issues galore, and other safety issues, lawsuits, STR battles, and again now beach erosion. Let's not add that to the list when our homes and beaches being washed away, killing the island's reputation with all these negative actions. Fourth, this is a win-win-win situation. By voting to use ATAX or any other beach renourishment funds to protect our public beach, we help our residents, our tourists, our day trippers, and it doesn't hurt the physical environment. The only issue is that no certainty is guaranteed with Mother Nature. But there are educated firms and organizations that have said that putting a berm at that end of the island could potentially keep the inlet from moving toward IOP and eating up even more of IOP. It's worth the risk. And let's prevent lawsuits. Let's not leave these homeowners hanging out. They would have no other option but lawsuits in a situation like that.
Ms. Nemes.
And last, we also will keep the threat of insurers at bay if we can prevent hurricane destruction, which the berm will help prevent. So in conclusion, I hope you will vote for a berm to support these people. I see nothing but something good coming from it. Thank you very much.
We have 3 speakers left, and you've got about 3 minutes left in citizens' comments.
Okay, so I'll make a motion, we extend citizens' comments to
Second.
these 3. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Nicole.
Renee Reddy.
Can you hear me? Okay. Honorable council members, my name is Renee Reddy, and I live at 118 Ocean Boulevard. I speak on behalf of myself and many residents on beach and off beach, some of whom you've already heard from. Today, this council, by its vote on beach renourishment, can show the entire island that it can be decisive when faced with a crisis that threatens a large group of residents. A good precedent would be for this council to vote for the continuous 1,500-foot berm that protects the island from storm surges going into hurricane season. This vote allows this island to bridge to the longer-term Army Corps solution, which would be sometime in 2024. This is especially true given that 1% of accommodations taxes are specifically being designated to this fund for beach renourishment, with approximately right now at $8 million in this account. A bad precedent would be for the city not to take immediate action, with funds already set aside for this purpose. The upcoming hurricane season can cause massive destruction of our beautiful beach, unprotected coastline, ecosystem, and properties. The inaction would fly in the face of any federal, state, or local guidelines that emphasized dunes must be protected at all cost. It protects our beaches, it protects our properties, and our endangered species like our sea turtles. It is easy to say that the city is not interested in protecting private property, but you are actually protecting this island, its beaches, and its ecosystem. Any beach renourishment, by definition, is designed to push back the high tide line and widen the beaches. We have heard certain council members trying to make the argument that minor beach renourishment benefits only beachfront owners on a public beach. However, that would argue against the very concept of beach renourishment, anywhere, anytime, on any coastline. There are others that would argue that oceanfront owners should pay for renourishment of a public beach. First, there is no mechanism to collect such funding, and it would be unprecedented for a handful of owners to renourish a public beach that is open to all. Further, any destruction of property will severely impact the availability and cost of homeowners' insurance to everyone on this island. The bottom line is that the south side of the island has no protection going into hurricane season. We have the funds set aside to protect this island from damage and destruction. I hope this vote tonight would be 9-0 in favor of protecting us all. Thank you for your time.
Cindy Solomon.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Solomon. I live at 130 Ocean Boulevard. I'm a full-time resident. I've written 3 letters over the past 3 weeks and attended the workshop with OCRM 2 weeks ago virtually. Thank you for the attention you provided these letters, and in return, my remarks will be short, brief, and will not be repetitive. Appreciate the eloquence of all the individuals who've already spoken. I wanted to point out this problem, as others have pointed out, is not limited to a small number of homes. Even if it was, there's no solution for those homes that will work via those properties' owners' individual actions, such as building a wall of sandbags across the property or bringing sand in front of their home. As OCRM aptly provided as regards the sand, it will simply wash away. Rather, the only short-term solution is a contiguous wall of sand from Beach Inlet to at least 6th Avenue, where the erosion has done so much damage. Fortunately, I'm not one of those 4 to 5 owners whose homes are in imminent danger, yet. I measured the distance between my dune and my fence and pool to be about 30 to 40 feet. So likely, it will be soon before I'm in that danger. As more dune was washed away even this week with a late night storm, so normal for this time of year that most of you slept through it, though I stayed awake and watched the dune and went out and measured it to see if I'd have a dune in the morning. Representative of what we faced 2 months ago, when one day I took the dogs for a walk on the beach, and the next day I literally walked out down to my dock with my dogs, and there was an 8-foot drop. I would say at least 30 feet of beach was washed away that night. Further, the beach we're discussing is a public beach, has been pointed out, and we all know. As I outlined in my letter, this situation poses multiple public safety concerns, including beach access in an emergency situation, and injury from attempting to access the beach. If for no other reason, this issue should be solved. If the storm that washed so much sand away 2 months ago was a named storm, the decision to provide this sand would likely be unanimous. This vote today should be the same. 6 years ago this summer, sand was trucked in and almost immediately after Irma, with no other remediation or long-term plan to help protect the public beach. And it worked for almost 6 years. In this case, there is a larger fix in the works by the Army Corps of Engineers, and this solution only needs to last until the work is done next year, 9 to 12 months. The City Council has had the foresight to have created a fund for beach renourishment, so there is money in the budget for just this type of emergency situation. Thank you. And the short-term fix will cost far less than what is in the fund. I am asking all of you to vote for what the community is asking for and needs, and what the city has provided funds for. A wall of sand that will protect both the public and private interests at risk until a larger, island-wide, sustainable solution to the problem is executed. I greatly thank you for your consideration, and I hope that those who have had the opportunity have come to see what's going on at that end of the beach, because it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Les Kutcher.
Sorry, I'm old. My name is Les Kutcher. I live at 9 Ocean Point Drive in Wild Dunes. I have been a homeowner in Wild Dunes for 32 years. Full disclosure, I am presently a new director on the WDCA board. What I am about to offer, however, are my own thoughts and perspectives. They do not in any way represent or reflect the positions of the WDCA or of the Wild Dunes Resort. I am confident that my being up here now will cause as much consternation to others on the WDCA board as I hope it will cause to the council. In truth, I live just about as far away from Breach Inlet as it is possible to live and yet still be on the Isle of Palms. Moreover, though a full-time resident, I have not personally been to any beach anywhere in nearly a decade. I am simply no longer able to safely navigate the soft sand. All that having been said, I am disappointed that the IOP City Council again finds itself in a reactive or defensive position when dealing with a serious island-specific problem that is not at all unexpected or unanticipated. Rather, breach inlet erosion, we have been told by our experts, is cyclical, recurrent, and predictable, and thus a policy or SOP should have been in place such that the city and/or affected homeowners could preemptively mount sufficient and effective resources and avert the disaster in the making. Because kicking the can down the road has become an art form, and 11th hour crisis management is the rule rather than the exception, many desperate homeowners have been stuck in limbo for weeks as you, our leaders, slowly sort it out. Whether the cost of such a program is borne by the affected homeowners, all homeowners, the businesses on the island, the City of Isle of Palms, or some combination thereof, it should have already worked out and formalized. Wherever you live, inside or outside the gates, near the beach, near the marsh, or near neither, we are all in this together. The beach is our greatest gift and most valuable resource and asset. It must be defended and protected at all costs, and by all of us that live, invest, and/or do business here. We have hopefully learned that help from the state comes at a cost to home rule and quality of life that is perhaps too dear. Furthermore, claims to repair beachfront home damage will at the very least send insurance premiums that have already skyrocketed into the stratosphere. That is, of course, if any carrier even chooses to continue going forward writing coverage. No coverage would be a big problem for all, but devastating for those with mortgages that require that coverage be maintained.
Mr. Kutcher.
This issue must be successfully resolved here tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all for that. Our next item is special presentations. We've got a couple of Spirit of the Island Awards for Ted Kinghorn and the Acme Low Country Kitchen. I know some folks are out in the hallway if they want to come in just for this particular piece. Ted, I know you've got others with you, so we'll start with Ted Kinghorn.
Real quick, the Spirit of the Island Award is a prestigious award that recognizes an individual or an organization who have made significant contributions to the life and well-being of the Isle of Palms. This award will recognize an individual or organization's remarkable single achievement or community service and volunteerism. We started this award about 2 years ago at the suggestion of Councilmember Ward, and we've had a handful or so of recipients at this point, so we've got 2 tonight, which is great. Ted and Ann, if y'all want to come on up, and I know Jim's out there, if anybody else wants to come in, that would be great. So I will just read a couple of pieces from letters of recommendation. So what happens with these awards is somebody makes a recommendation, in this case, Jim Thompson. There are letters of recommendation that go along with it, so I'll just read a few of those, Ted. So stand down there, pal. So first couple of comments. Ted is a visionary. He has a talent for seeing the long view and is often ahead of his time. He has the ability to garner consensus among people for the common good. He parlayed his political experience into a successful business and then has spent years since that time giving back to the community through service on city council, membership in the Exchange Club, continuing to promote and support the Liberty Fellowship, and most recently by the creation of the Law Enforcement Neighborhood Support Foundation on the IOP. For those who choose to join him in life's path, he becomes that person. He is that person who sends the text of congratulations or got your back just when you need it. Ted Kinghorn is not about claiming the spotlight for himself. He is about shining light on fresh ideas and working smart to transform those ideas into realities. From another letter of recommendation, I feel that Ted Kinghorn embodies what this award is all about. Having known Ted for several years, I can say that his sense of community involvement, desire to help people, and deliver a lasting, positive, and generational impact on the community is unparalleled. And finally, volunteerism is something Ted has been involved in his whole life. He was an active volunteer in Virginia, and that continued when he and Ann moved to the Isle of Palms. So Ted, it's our pleasure to present you the Spirit of the Island Award in recognition of your outstanding service and dedication to the IOP. Hey, Ted. Would you come here? Brian wants to do a quick photo.
Well, if he's going to do that, I want to thank council, the mayor, and those that submitted those kind words, Jim and Linda and Dennis, and of course staff, because none of this happens without staff support. Okay, what do we got here?
All right, I'll come back. You want to borrow my coat? My twin. All right, next, Bobby, if you and Roger want to come on up, or whoever you'd like. All right, fair enough.
Roger heard about being in front of people.
He said, he immediately came up with other plans.
I got plans.
I get it. Thank you all for being here tonight. Again, so these are owners of Acme Low Country Kitchen. This was nominated by Jimmy Ward, and again, I'll just read a few comments from some of the letters of recommendation that were on behalf of Acme. In the aftermath of the ugly incidents on our beach on April 7th, 2023, Acme stepped up and offered free meals to all first responders in their excellent restaurant here on the Isle of Palms. This was not the first time this company has come forward to support us in an extraordinary manner since it opened for business in January 2008. Acme has always offered generous discounts to Isle of Palms City employees. Acme is a well-respected member of our business community. This one is from Tracy Moses. Acme does so much for the island community and always looks for ways to help. When the island has major storms, power outages, Acme will cook food and give it to the residents and first responders. And finally, from former Mayor Jimmy Carroll, the owners of Acme Low Country Kitchen have always been there helping our public safety personnel with huge discounts on their daily meals year-round. We are lucky to have such fine businesses and people who give back to our city employees but never recognized. Please reward the Acme Low Country Kitchen with this Spirit of Island Award. So Bobby, on behalf of City Council, we're proud to give you this Spirit of Island Award in recognition of your outstanding service and dedication to the Isle of Palms.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. That's nice to start off meeting with good stuff.
Yep.
On that side.
For change, yep.
Next item is approval of previous meeting minutes. We've got the public hearing, fiscal '24 budget on May 23rd, city council meeting on May 23rd, special city council meeting on June 13th, special city council workshop on June 13th, public services and facilities committee meeting on June 6th, and public safety committee meeting also on June 6th.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any changes, edits to be made? Nope. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Thank you. Next item is old business. There is none. New business, consideration of
Mr. Mayor,
recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, can I?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've been presented with something here tonight I don't think that we expected, and obviously wouldn't have had a chance to get onto the agenda, but it seems like we should have a discussion around this petition that was submitted to us and determine what action council is going to take on this, especially on behalf of what, 1,200 citizens have requested. So I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules of order and add to the agenda the new, under, I guess, a new item 6A, under new business, the discussion of the petition to limit short-term rentals presented to council and to discuss actions that council will take to satisfy the petition demands.
I'd second that motion.
Have to have a
Yeah, Matt.
vote on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't know that complies with FOIA. There's got to be an emergency situation, one, and approved by a two-thirds vote. So I think we can probably address it at the next meeting or call a special meeting when it's been advertised and the media's been given proper notice and it was on the agenda, but I'd be concerned about amending the agenda.
All right, that's fair.
Should we go ahead and try to schedule a special meeting then?
Well, we need to pull that, can you withdraw the motion, please?
Withdraw the motion in a second.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Thank you. Councilman Cruz?
I'll withdraw the second. So do we need to make a motion to schedule the meeting? Is that how that would work?
I think we just schedule one, right?
Okay, so make a motion to schedule the meeting. What is the soonest we can do that, within a week or so? Special meeting?
We don't need a motion.
You would just need to schedule it within 24 hours. That is a requirement. So as long as you meet that requirement and it's posted and advertised to the media, I think you should be good to go. Certainly, this council can have a conversation about a date that works for everybody and can be announced publicly, and we will make the appropriate notifications and agenda.
Yeah. I guess we could slot it before the next workshop, actually, if we wanted to, since we know people are, it's only 2 weeks away.
Yeah, I would suggest that's a good idea, just because
Say it again, Scott.
I think that would be a good idea. I mean, when we had the workshops initially, it was kind of like we're going to do anything we need to do to address the situation, and I think this would qualify for that.
So have a special council meeting before the workshop?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would suggest that.
And Mac can be prepared to tell us exactly procedurally how we march through this.
So I would recommend 3 o'clock on Tuesday, July 11th.
That works for me.
I won't be here, but I can call in, I guess.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because we don't.
I see a head nod.
I don't think I don't want to be in town.
I'll be here.
So still a.
And if you
still
have a quorum,
yeah.
you can still go ahead and schedule the meeting.
Okay, you could call in?
Yeah.
So it'd give us,
Yeah.
okay. All right, good, Desiree, Mac?
Yes, sir.
I'll change my plans. I'll make sure I'm here.
So, again, new business item, consideration of recommendation from the Public Safety Committee to defer action on a new noise ordinance until the city receives noise study report from Wild Dunes Resort, and to consider hiring a noise consultant and/or city planner to advise the city on noise policy. So let's take this in two pieces.
Can I make a statement first?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Mayor, there has been a request that I consider recusing myself from consideration on the vote for the noise ordinance. And in response to that, I have petitioned the South Carolina State Ethics Commission for an opinion on whether I need to ethically recuse myself. I'm going to submit the letter that will be printed as part of the record, but I'm just going to read one sentence from it at this point. Even assuming one of these entities had a, quote, economic interest in the noise ordinance, recusal is not required. So there's no reason for me to require, and I will continue to participate actively in our deliberations.
So let's tackle this in two pieces if we can. First, the deferment, and then giving staff direction on hiring consultants or using police staff to do this. So is there a motion to follow the Public Safety Committee recommendation to defer the noise ordinance?
Motion to follow that recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Desiree,
Yeah.
anything? Sorry.
Are we
John.
saying we're going to hire a noise consultant?
We're going to do part two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll take care of the deferment piece and then
okay.
give some conversation or staff
Can I ask
direction.
a question procedurally, Mr. Mayor? So if we're going to defer this, when this comes up for second reading, we'll just have to defeat the
Defer it
ordinance.
also.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit kludgy, but
Okay.
compliant. How about
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Other questions or comments? Desiree, anything else from you?
No, sir.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. So, John, to your point, so for staff direction, we've talked about this at the workshop and hiring some type of expert, whether it's a noise consultant, city planner, and I know we've talked with Chief Cornett about using his staff just periodically over the course of the summer to take routine readings. John, do you have a question or comment or?
Well, I'm not sure at this point what a noise consultant's going to do for us. I don't think it'd be very good money spent to get more readings or try to get readings of noise, or I don't know exactly what they do. I thought the intent of the deferment was two things. One is that we were waiting for Wild Dunes report to come to us. And the other is I think there's some questions on some of the provisions of the noise ordinance today that some disagree with. So I would suggest we not hire a new noise consultant, but that we get Wild Dunes report, and then we go back to the committee or go back to the workshop with this thing and see if we can't come to some consensus on what we can all live with in the noise ordinance. But I don't think it would pass today the way it's written.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to hire an expert who can guide us on the final crafting of our ordinance, because I think that right now, council members are feeling as if we have opinions about what the noise levels should be, but have no one who can authoritatively tell us how that level of noise is used in other communities to control noise, and what levels are acceptable and not. So just having that expert here to advise us is what I'm looking for.
I just don't feel like that's a very good use of our money. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about this, and there's clearly not an interest of council right now of passing what we have. But there are tons and tons of cities around the country that have noise ordinances. We have an attorney that can tell us what's fair or legal, is going to stand up in court. I feel like hiring someone, paying money to have us, to tell us what we pretty much all know is just not well-spent money of the city's money.
Yeah. Jimmy?
We need to have a motion and a second procedurally to continue discussion.
Do we need a motion for that? I'll make that motion.
No, it's the first part. It's two parts.
Yeah, so we had the deferment. This is really about hiring some type of expert.
I'll make the motion to have the discussion regarding hiring a consultant.
Second.
John, what about, because we had also talked about using our police staff to do various readings around the island they're all over the island all summer. Not a consultant, but at least a bogey for us to have some data to work with. What's Shell's reaction to that?
I think there's three elements of this noise ordinance. One is the residential limits in there, and I've not heard any argument around the way the levels that they're set at today. The second one is with the Sweetgrass Inn and that whole issue. And I think there is some argument on whether the decibel level in there is the right decibel or not, and that's part of why we're waiting for the Wild Dunes report to come back. The third one is the Front Beach area. And so I'm not so sure that having the BSOs or anybody, I don't know where they go measuring unless they're measuring at the two areas that we currently have some question about. And some of that can be taken care of. I think the Wild Dunes one's set, but the Front Beach one can be set with just changing the way the noise ordinance policy is written. If we exclude Front Beach, there's different things we can do, I think. So I just don't know the value that we derive out of having the BSOs going around the island taking noise readings. If that's extra, information that somebody would want, that's fine, but I think the core of the issue of those two areas, and that's part of why we're deferring, is to get more readings from the Sweetgrass.
Blair?
Thank you, Mayor. The problem that I've grappled with on the Public Safety Committee, and I think everybody on the committee grappled with, is we don't know what the right decibel levels are. We just don't know for Sweetgrass or for the commercial area. We've all assumed that 55 and 60 decibels works for the residential. That's what an expert, if we could find that type of an expert, could potentially help us with. Otherwise, which is something that I had proposed a while back, is pick a decibel level and let's move forward. And let's see what happens and then look at it again in the fall. The problem with that is obvious and I won't get into all that. So that's the reason for an expert, is we need guidance on what the proper decibel level is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is going to sound a little bit redundant, but we've been redundant on this subject for months now. We've talked around and around and around about the noise ordinance, and we haven't made any progress. So I'm in favor of, if it takes us an expert, not a city planner in my opinion, but a nice expert noise consultant to help us with this, that's fine. Because to Councilmember Hahn, and I think Councilmember Bogosian touched on it, we have at least three different areas that we have to deal with. Front Beach, the Windjammer, that's our entertainment center. The decibel levels down there, for me, it could be sky high. They know when to start, they know when to finish. Everybody has fun down there. That's a different decibel level. Sweetgrass Inn, right there, with residential around it. We have a very complex problem down there that has been outlined not only by the resort, but by Mr. Klaus. And again, we need to have some feedback and expertise from someone or some entity that can give us some idea of what maybe other communities that have been faced with that type of situation might have encountered. Is it going to take a little longer? Yes, it probably will, but we've gone this far, and we've been, again, around and around and around with this subject. We owe it to ourselves to do it as best we can. Third area, residential, where we all live. That's another animal. What about the enforcement in the residential areas and the livability of our residents? There again, we need to look at the proper decibel level as best we can, how to measure that decibel level, from what property lines, whatever, and put some enforcement in place so that when we get those livability calls, there truly is a noise issue out there in the neighborhood that is dealt with effectively. So I know I'm rambling here, but my thoughts are that let's go with the city consultant, the expert, and bring it on.
Scott?
I'm just going to probably repeat myself from several months ago. I'm kind of in that three-bucket mode as well. I don't know why we're messing with Front Beach or the commercial district. It's not been a problem. We continue to try to overlay this new ordinance on top of it. Why don't we leave it alone? Residential areas, 60 seems to be the number everybody's good with. That takes care of the majority of the island. Then we're left with the sweetgrass. I mean, I think that's really what we're trying to solve for. We're just beating around the bush on it. And for us to get a consultant, what are they going to tell us? That 60 in a residential area, which is kind of the norm across the country, is the number? I don't think we need a consultant for that. Leave the Front Beach alone, the commercial districts, and let's figure out how to solve the problem for sweetgrass.
Desiree, I know you've had a conversation or two with a noise consultant out there, and it sounds like they are few and far between and expensive, which kind of goes hand in hand. So not to put words in your mouth, but.
No, yes, this was something that was discussed briefly at the Public Safety Committee a couple of months ago. I reached out to a noise consultant expert from Florida that assists communities and municipalities in drafting policy. She's no longer working, she's retired, gave me a couple of other references, and I talked to one additional, and you're right, there are very few of them, they're very busy, and in order for us to be able to engage them, they will require conducting a full-blown study, doing readings all over the island before they can make any recommendation on whether a decibel reading is appropriate for one area or not. They're not going to take readings that we take. They're not probably will not necessarily use the study that the Sweetgrass Inn is doing. They're going to want to do their own study. So the estimates that I received was between $20,000 and $40,000 for a full-blown study that could yield potential recommendations for noise policy. The ordinance that's in front of you has been modeled against other communities that have adopted similar ordinances, trying to find an objective measurement for the noise. We looked at big and small communities, coastal communities, urban communities. Obviously, Isle of Palms is very different. So we looked at various communities to help as a guide. And in addition, throughout that process, the police department, while they were out there, did collect some readings. Some may argue that they're not scientific, what kind of device did we use, but those were the data points that were used when we drafted, and with the assistance, obviously, of our city attorney, drafted the noise ordinance that's presented to you all, and it's gone through multiple iterations, of course, and certainly can be continued to be modified.
And remind me of the timing of the Wild Dunes. I think it's like within weeks, right?
I believe it had been.
July 22nd was when they were going to do the readings.
The next reading last weekend. Yeah.
Correct. And just as a reminder, Ms. Hack offered to provide to the city a summary of the report, not the complete report. We've requested the complete report because it was not commissioned by the city or paid by the city. I don't think the city cannot demand that report to be provided. So we're hopeful that maybe they can provide additional information, but we just don't know what kind of information they'll share with the city that could potentially help in the crafting of this noise policy.
And I guess the next Public Safety Committee would be July 8th, 9th, somewhere in there.
The committee does not have a meeting scheduled in July. The decision was made to defer that month unless an issue came up and the meeting could be called. So if this is an issue that needs to be addressed at that point, then I think
it just came up.
Okay.
And it would have been the 11th anyhow.
Okay.
The same time we had the meeting.
So where I was headed with that whole conversation was, possibly we'll have the Wild Dunes report. Hang on, people. Possibly we'll have the Wild Dunes report that could get to the Public Safety Committee meeting that could kind of run down this path that I'm here, the residential versus the Front Beach versus Sweetgrass. So what if we head down a path of, let's see what the Wild Dunes report has, let's kick it back to the public safety to review the Wild Dunes report, and kind of take these three buckets as some of you are recommending?
And I don't think it would hurt, and maybe this is a question for Chief Cornett, but I don't think it would hurt to have some additional readings. I mean, these
Kind of where
are,
I'm-
everybody's got the devices, and, just having some more data might help.
And that
Not a
is,
downside.
Right.
and that is our plan, that we've discussed it, plan to have our officers and our beach service officers to do that randomly, not only at Sweetgrass, not only at Front Beach, but also the residential districts, so that we have a sort of a holistic view. I do want to note that the version that you have in front of you has been severely amended by the Public Safety Committee. So this version is very different than the one you saw for first reading. So that changes are included there.
Rusty.
Thank you. Just a word of fair warning. When we get this report from Wild Dunes, is there going to be any credibility in that report in regards to how it's going to be perceived and received by this council? Personally, I think not. I think we're going to circle back to the same place we are now. And at some point, we're going to say we need to have some expert advice. Just my thoughts. I may be wrong. I hope we're not talking about the noise ordinance until December, but it's on that path.
Yeah, I think Rusty makes a good point. If we're going to have an expert take noise readings, now's the time to do it, because if we drag our feet, it'll be next summer.
Well, it depends on what approach you want to take. If you want to take an approach that we're going to measure the noise and then set a noise limit at whatever the noise is, that's one thing. But if you want to set a noise limit at what is a reasonable, acceptable decibel level to protect residents' quality of life, that's a different argument. Then the hotel's going to have to find a way to get to that level. So, I mean, I'm not one to measure the decibel levels and then say we're going to set the level at that, whatever it is. I mean, if that's that easy, we can go out there with the decibel level, and if it's 80, we'll say, okay, we'll set it at 80. You can't be above 80, but that's not the purpose here.
Mr. Mayor.
It's a little more complicated than that, and we've gone through all this with the Public Safety Committee. I don't disagree with you, but we don't know what 70 is, or what 80 is, and what's reasonable given the venues that we're talking about. We don't know. Mr. Klaus, and I respect Mr. Klaus in coming here 16 times, wants 45. So I don't know. We need some help in that regard. Or we can just make it up as we go and then revisit it in the fall, which was my kind of patchwork recommendation until all this happened.
Jan.
As an engineer, we always start every study with data collection. So it helps to know what our baseline is out there. I mean, the one thing I expect to get from the Sweetgrass Inn that I would accept is whether they are comfortable with the levels we're talking about or not comfortable. They're not going to tell us if their decibel levels are way off the charts there. They're not going to tell us if, they probably would tell us if they're not, if they're quiet. So that's what we'll get from Sweetgrass Inn. I also think that if we have our police force making these measurements, the first thing I do when I'm doing data collection is train the people taking the measurements. So we have a uniform way of data collection that we can compare apples to apples across the island. That's what a professional would do, is first, he'd give us advice as to what's possible in other areas, and secondly, if we need to collect data, we'll collect it in a way that's appropriate and consistent throughout. So I would prefer to have an expert to at least advise us as to, a lot of this is going to be general knowledge for someone, an expert in the field, and some of it will be site-specific.
Jimmy.
So we have a noise ordinance in place, and I read reports most every morning. There's violations that the police respond to. I don't know if they give them warnings or tickets. Would look at next month's report. My question is, directly is, we have something in place. What are we trying to improve that? And if so, what is the specific questions that we're trying to answer before we go forward with anything? So what is
Oh,
the
okay.
specific, what are we trying to improve on?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, I can answer that very easily. I think the noise level that I would find too loud is going to be different from a teenager's level and what they would find too loud, or a young adult would find. And so what is reasonable for a community of people of various interests to find, to live with? And that's really the question that I'm trying to grapple with, is, it's how quiet is too quiet, how loud is too loud. Otherwise, right now, we just have a subjective opinion of the person standing at the door. And if we go to court, then it's one opinion against another. There's no specific level that says this is too loud or this is not too loud.
And, I mean, my understanding of how this whole thing started was because the police chief was telling us that it's not, what we have right now is not enforceable because it doesn't have numbers.
Right.
And they need numbers. But I don't understand, we are not the only city in the world that has ever dealt with the
Right.
noise ordinance. I just feel like we're trying to reinvent the wheel here. And I think we're trying to reinvent the wheel because of one specific entity. I feel like spending money to come up with another wheel is a waste of money.
Rusty, quick comment.
Yeah, thank you again. Last time for me. This is the third time I've spoke. I've run out of words, and I think I've exceeded my limit after this. If we ask 1,000 people what the decibel level should be, we'll probably get 1,000 different answers. Maybe 500, I don't know. But I mean, at some point, we've got to have some level of expertise, feedback, and some credibility that we can all kind of anchor to and say, for this part of the island, this is what we are going to put in place. Whether teenagers aside, senior citizens aside, whatever. I mean, at some point, we've got to decide on something that the chief can enforce. And he's told us repeatedly that he has to have a set, sustained decibel level to do that effectively. So that's all I'm looking for. And if it takes us a consultant or an expert to get to that point, I'm in favor of it, since we've been talking so long about a noise ordinance and decibel levels.
Scott?
Didn't Mount Pleasant just adopt something recently? Why don't we, instead of spending money on a consultant, see what they went through, invite them over here, they're our neighbors.
We
And
did.
We did, and
Committee.
60 decibels.
Yeah, Mount Pleasant's
Yeah,
really
they,
low.
the
What
amount,
number?
town
Let
of
me-
Mount Pleasant
for the residential, or
For everything.
everything, that was for some, okay.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah, they have one across the, just in an
60
attempt to
during
move
the
this
day.
along, I'm going to make a motion, and we
I
can,
think it goes
We already
to,
have a motion, I think.
well, a motion was just to discuss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to rephrase the motion. I would suggest we kick this back to committee, review the Wild Dunes report. Sounds like we were pretty comfortable with the residential. Would agree with Scott and others on the front beach. So I think we are waiting on this Wild Dunes report. I think we take it, let committee deal with it, and come back to this council with
yeah,
a modified
Second on
vote
that.
if need be.
yeah.
I'm not sure that was a motion or just
It was
a
a-
ramble, but.
Worked for
Send it
me.
back to committee.
You need a second.
He did.
Scott did.
Councilmember Pierce did.
Don't we need to vote on the first motion? Or,
Well, the motion was to
It was
discuss,
just
and you
to
did.
discuss, yeah,
yeah, we did. Okay.
yeah. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Thank you. Next item, consideration of options for a dune restoration project along the southern portion of the island as outlined by Coastal Science and Engineering, and approval of an amount not to exceed $232,000 for design, coordination, monitoring, and construction of the chosen project.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the full 1,500-foot berm at the price not to exceed $232,000, and concurrently to seek the 50% funding from the state that Senator Campson had suggested for us. That could potentially reduce that cost by down to $116,000.
Second.
Second.
So let's go with CSE and let's hear from them. In your packet, we had lengthy discussion at workshop. In your packet is options for us to consider. So, Stephen, you want to take the podium if you don't mind, please? So let's just assume everybody's read that, looked at it. If you can just give us kind of a high level, Stephen, if you don't mind, of the options, and then we'll just open it up for Q&A if you're okay with that.
Sure, absolutely. The options, and as I said at the
Stephen,
workshop,
if you don't mind, there you go.
as I said at the workshop, there's not really a great option here. These are all kind of less than ideal solutions for some episodic erosion that's occurring there. We were out on the beach this morning to kind of look and see how things have changed over the past 2 weeks, and it looks like along most of the area we are seeing a good bit of recovery of the dry sand berm. Now we are at a deep tide condition this week, so next week we'll have a little bit higher tide, so I expect the water line could come up a little further next week. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here, so. The alternatives, all of these are, they shouldn't be considered beach nourishment, okay? Beach nourishment is additions of sand to a beach system, but nourishment is generally involving large quantities where you're actually trying to restore the volume of a profile. So you're adding a dune and dry sand beach. What we're talking about here is miter dune restoration, as OCRM defines it. OCRM in any of these alternatives allows you to construct a dune that's 6 feet tall and 20 feet wide. If you average that out or do that in a unit volume basis is how we usually do that in our engineering world, that's about 4.4 cubic yards of sand for every linear foot of beach you have. So if you have a 100-foot lot, that gives you about 440 cubic yards of sand that would go in that lot. And that's about 25 truckloads of sand per lot if you were bringing it in via dump truck. So to put that into perspective, that area erodes and accretes substantially from year to year, sometimes to the tune of 35 to 40 cubic yards per foot any given year. So when we're talking about doing a dune restoration, for instance, from 2021 to 2022, the breach inlet reach lost about 100,000 yards of sand. 2 years before that, it gained 100,000 yards of sand. So it's a very small quantity, but can certainly provide protection because you're putting sand up in the profile in the dune feature, and you're also restoring some of the natural slopes and things so you don't have the escarpments and things. So just kind of an overall view of what we're talking about here. Now, as far as beach nourishment goes, that's something our company absolutely supports. And after our last large-scale project, we communicated with the city that when we start planning for this next renourishment project, which we know will come down the road at the east end at Wild Dunes, include the area from Front Beach south as a potential fill site. And we're starting that process well ahead, if the city moves forward. They have it in the budget for FY24 to start that permitting process well ahead of where we have before. So we're trying to get ahead of the game there. And that would involve doing large-scale nourishment where we're placing hundreds of thousands of yards of material on areas of the beach, whether it's the north or the south, that need it at the time. And with the recent news of this Corps of Engineers beneficial use project, that kind of came out of the blue. We've been working with the Corps and kind of discussing it for a couple of years with them, and we've suggested Breach Inlet is a good site. They suggested Breach Inlet is a good site. We've kind of both approached this as from different sides, but that kind of it came out of the blue, but is a huge benefit to the city because they're going to basically do a beach nourishment project for you at relatively little cost to the city, and that cost we can discuss in kind of a separate project. But that would involve several 100,000 yards of material brought to the beach rather than 6,000, 10,000 that we're talking about today. So that's the long-term, big picture view that we're trying to work towards. Responding to this potential restoration project, we listed a couple of different alternatives. I'll get a little closer to the mic. And those range from doing a 1,500-foot berm that would cover most of the area that was impacted by this event that we had in May. I went back and looked at some of the water levels. We had a tide in Charleston Harbor over 8 feet a couple of times in May. That's a huge tide, way above the fall spring tides that we get. Coupled with the waves and the wind, it was basically a minor tropical storm event that hit, and that really affected up and down the coast of South Carolina. So it was a very big event that initially caused the erosion of the dune that we're seeing, and we are seeing some recovery. The trucking project is a simple to permit project. Doing the 1,500 yards is simple math. It's simple in theory. You're just trucking sand in and placing it along the dune. My major concern with that project is just the time of year that we're at right now. It would involve 50 to 100 trucks coming onto the island every day, dumping that load at a beach access, and we could potentially look at the access at Breach Inlet or Fifth Avenue. And then you would have to essentially close the beach section from wherever that material was dumped to the end of the placement limit. And that would take 2 to 3 weeks probably to complete that project. So it's a very severe impact to traffic and beachgoers at this time of year. With any of these projects, I'm also concerned about the longevity. If we're saying that, we saw some very extensive erosion where you're losing 30 feet of beach in a couple of days. If we put a dune in that's 20 feet wide, there's nothing we can do to design a dune to make it last longer than nature wants it to last. So if the waves come up and get it, it could be a short-term fix, but that's, living on the coast. You have that risk. So that's the large-scale project. And then there's basically a smaller scale project where you're addressing the most severely eroded properties that are at or near what OCRM defines as an emergency condition. And that's where the water line is within 20 feet of a pool, a house, or a golf course also counts. So that project, you could potentially do 2 ways. You could do the same type of trucking project. You're just cutting the volume in close to half and cutting the impact time in about half. Or you could potentially request that the state allow you to scrape sand. So you could do that basically moving, similar to what we did after Hurricane Irma, where you're moving sand from lower in the profile back up to the dune area. Generally, if we have a highly erosional beach where it's been chronically eroding for years and the beach is very narrow, we don't recommend scraping because you're just kind of pushing it up the hill for it to fall right back in. There around Breach, there's a very large ridge and runnel system. There's a lot of sand in the wet sand beach and the low tide beach. It's just not up at the dune presently. So scraping there is a viable option. It's a much, much cheaper option, and it can be done with smaller equipment, and you only have to close the section of the beach, the parcel that you're working at that day. So it's a lot less impact. So those are kind of the options. Again, this time of year, none of them are a great option. We are going into hurricane season. The peak of season is, starting in September and October. So there, the option to let's look at it for a couple of weeks, try to get towards Labor Day when the crowds start to thin out a little bit, and then, evaluate whether we want to do something is certainly on the table.
Rusty. Thank you, Mayor. Couple of questions, Stephen. Thank you for the update. But on the sand scraping option, if I remember correctly, if my notes here are good, you estimated that for the affected properties down there, and we have a number of them, I guess there's probably 10 altogether and 5 being fairly close to the critical line from the escarpment. But the estimate was about $3,000 per property for sand scraping, correct?
Yes, sir.
And doing that with a bobcat, and that being less intrusive to the beach traffic, environment, whatever. So is that something that you think would be a viable option for us at this point, given that it appears for right now there's dry sand down there? I've been there 3 times in 2 weeks. And I spent Saturday 3 hours down there waiting for a high tide and up and down the beach. And there was plenty of beach. It's more narrow than normal, but still there's plenty of beach, and there were a lot of people on the beach throwing more than normal. But still there's plenty of beach, and there were a lot of people on the beach throwing footballs, tossing frisbees, and doing other things that people do, including 3 people that came whizzing by me on an e-bike. Another story. All right, so they weren't close to me though, so that was fine. Not close to anybody else either at that point. But it seems to me, in the 3 times I've been down there in the last week and a half, and having lived here for 39 years, I've seen that side of the island come and go many times. And you can even evidence that from some of the walkovers where, it's attached, I think, to some of the old pilings for original walkovers, or expose some of those. So even though we've lost sand, it seems that we're in a place right now, unless we have a serious issue with king tides again, that it's holding its own, And if any of them got within that critical line of 20 feet or less between the escarpment and their pool or their house, that maybe a viable option would be to pursue this OCRM permit and have the homeowner pay up to $3,000 to replenish the dune in front of their house. That's where I am right now.
It's certainly a viable option. It would be, whether you scrape it or whether you truck it in, it's a very similar project. If you only do the houses that are most effective and you don't have a continuous dune, it can be more susceptible to erosion off the ends of it. I wouldn't recommend doing a house, skipping a house, doing a house, skipping a house, but doing, sections that are most critically eroded, is.
Well, I think I saw there was something that came in today. I don't think it's found its way to the deck yet because it came in late this afternoon, and it was from Desiree, the city council, regarding the Isle of Palm scraping potential, and it was some feedback you got from Matt Slagle.
Yeah.
Yes.
With, is it OCRM? And he was saying at that point that there might be some way that OCRM would consider scraping for the areas that are meeting the 20-foot or, line from the escarpment, or even those that may be close to that, maybe in the 21 to 26 or even 30-foot frame, I guess. So it seems to me that based on what you got there, that that might be something that we could do and do pretty quickly that would at least assure that the properties that have been identified, and I think there were on Ocean Boulevard, 120, 122, 130, all the way up to 206. Is that correct?
Yes.
And 212 and 214.
Yes.
And I'm no engineer, okay? But just observing down there last Saturday.
If you hold your comments, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, there needs to be silence out there. All right, so what I observed last Saturday in the photographs that I took, I saw dry sand. I didn't see any further erosion of the near the escarpment, and it just looks to me like what's been identified here. Those same house numbers, the photos I took, they are certainly the ones that are in most danger. There's no doubt about that. But there still is an opportunity here, I think, to do it in a more efficient way, a cheaper way, and I think that what's being planned with the Army Corps of Engineers for 9 months to 12 months from now, I think that's excellent. I think what we do is we try to buy time to the end, but I don't know that we need a 1,500-foot berm, is what I'm saying.
Blair and then John.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you talk about the permitting process? As I understand it, we can't do anything unless there's a permit, correct?
Correct.
And we have two types of permits. We have an emergency permit, but currently OCRM's rule is you got to be 20 feet. We don't have anybody that qualifies for an emergency permit right now. So then you go to the regular permit. If you could just talk about that and how long does the permit take, and when could we reasonably expect to do anything?
Sure. So there's a general permit for minor dune restoration that's available anytime. And that also includes sand fencing and vegetation that can be added if you select that. You don't have to have a 20-foot criteria for that, and you can only truck in sand under that option. The city has already applied for that permit, I believe spanning the beach up until Fifth Avenue, that would cover that entire area.
And when would you expect us to have an answer on that?
I expect that probably this week or early next week.
Okay.
That would be in effect. The emergency permit.
And you expect them to grant that request?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 100%. There's no reason that they wouldn't.
Okay.
It would require working with the local turtle team to identify any nests that were laid. So every morning before trucks or equipment were out on the beach, they would work with the team to say, yes, the beach is clear, or any nests have been relocated, so we would avoid those impacts. And probably working just during daylight hours to avoid any lighting impacts to turtles and things like that. The emergency permit allows for, in areas where the high tide line is within 20 feet of a structure, you can do sand scraping, you can truck in sand, or you could install emergency sandbags. Generally speaking, that is a 20-foot criteria. However, if OCRM believes that that is going to be reached imminently, so it may not be today, but based off erosion that's occurred over the past several weeks or months, they know that it's likely to occur, then they may be flexible and allow, especially if it comes from a city rather than an individual, a little flexibility to say, yes, we'll go ahead and issue you the scraping permit with the anticipation that it's going to continue to erode.
Has there been an application for that type of a permit?
There has not been an application. I asked Matt, I sent him, Mr. Slagle, this table to show him where things were as of the 12th of January, or I'm sorry, June, when we assessed it. And trying to get him to, understand that, this erosion has been ongoing and it may occur, so would they consider, preemptively, and he responded the way he did.
Yeah, and I read his response, which was very non-committal. It's like, well, maybe, maybe not. So if we did an emergency permit, how long does it typically take for them to issue that?
Those are only a couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah, those are very quick.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to respond to Councilman Streetman's comment about going to the beach on Saturday. There was 4-foot tide on Saturday, and I was down there with a 5'9" tide, and you couldn't get on the beach. It was flooded all the way up to the dunes. So we're expected to, on the next couple of weeks, Folly Beach just canceled their fireworks because of expected high tides coming. So God forbid what that place looks like after the end of the next couple of weeks with the high tides we're going to get. But, and also to this scraping idea, there's 40 homes on here from 100 to 410. And we're talking about 10 that are in that 39 feet or less, which is a very arbitrary number to say, okay, 39's emergency, but 43 is not going to be. So, but there's 10. So I don't know how you effectively scrape sand up on 10 homes that are interspersed without them completely, because the rest of the homes by them, the tide's going to come up, it's going to get behind that, it's going to wash it right out. And I think, Stephen, in your recommendations, you list 4, and going from a full dune restoration to a partial dune restoration to scraping to do nothing. I think the cost comes down in each of those, but also the probability of success comes down on each of those. Because the less you do, the more chance there's water to get in and wash it back out. I could not do a more compelling story than the people that marched up to this podium and the letters that we've received on why we should be doing the full dune restoration. And they said it all. We've heard from environmentalists, we've heard from material people, we've heard from people that live on Carolina that don't even live on the beach that are trying to be able to get access to it. We've heard from the homeowners on the beach. And what we're talking about is $116,000. Senator Campson has stepped up. He's got us an opportunity to get half the money from the state. We have to apply for it. He feels very good about us getting it. $116,000 to put to what our beach management and every single strategic document says. This is what we all voted for. It. This is what we do as a city. This is our responsibility, is to manage the beach. And the first time something comes up, we want to do something that doesn't even make sense. So I don't understand how you can sit here and not say we support $116,000 to try to save our beach.
Yeah, and I think the question and answer is much bigger than that. John, Stephen, you guys look at up and down the coast more than South Carolina. You're working with all kind of places. And I think in your report, you talked about the coastline has seen the same thing we've got going on at Breach. We live on a barrier island, it just happens. I guess one, is that true? There has been that type of erosion kind of up and down the coastline or the Carolinas? There has been that kind of erosion up and down?
Yes, every other client we work for has, individualized erosion issues, and some of them have. You go to some beaches and they would consider having 60 feet of dry sand from their houses as a very healthy condition.
Absolutely.
You look at places like Edisto at the north end where there's they may have 10 feet of a very little dune separating their house from their high tide line for years on end. So we see a wide variety of conditions, and we deal with emergency conditions all the time where people, literally have water up under their houses. But each community is different in what they accept as a healthy beach condition as well. So what works for one doesn't work for the other.
And I guess to the arbitrary comment, I mean, that's why the OCRM has the 20-foot line in the sand, literally, to say that's where it becomes an emergency, right? So you're not arbitrarily saying, okay, 42, 41, 38, whatever. I mean, is that fair?
Yes, and the reason why I identified it the way I did was to 20 to 30, I think we could approach OCRM and say, look, this is very likely to be within that 20 soon. 30 to 40 is, maybe a gray area. Anything to that, anything beyond that, I don't feel like I could go to OCRM and say, with engineering credibility that, hey, they're likely to be there in the next week. So, again, 2 months from now, things may be different, and if there's a large area that's meeting that condition, it's an easy call to say, immediately step in and do something. You're just kind of in a little gray area right now on what the best approach is.
Yeah, and I guess, and then I'll get to you, Jimmy. So if I think about, the 20-foot line, if you will, versus, the other measurements that you have outlined in your chart. I mean, are you seeing, and I guess you answered it really, but let me just clarify it a little bit. You're seeing communities approach it in different ways. Some are very, would love to have the 40, 50, 100-plus feet that we have here and up and down our coastline, our IOP coastline. I guess, to me, John, it's a little bit bigger question than just throw money at it. I mean, and it's only 116, or it's only 230. I mean, I guess there's some precedent and consistency that we need to be aware of, because there are other areas on this island, that are probably 40 and 50 feet from the line. If I'm them, I'm on our doorstep tomorrow to be asking about, where's my sand? What are you doing for me? And it's not, it's not within the state's guideline of where you have to act, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, there's just a precedent here that's been in place for quite some time around set aside who pays for it. I'm not even having that conversation at this point. It's really, when do you act, I guess, is my question. And reading through your report, when do you act?
Yeah, again, from our engineering.
I'm asking the expert.
We love the idea of any additional sand on the beach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sandbox problem. Having more sand in your box means you have a healthier beach. It gets really difficult around inlets because inlets are so dynamic. There's the engineering side of, the easiest thing for me to say would be truck in 20,000 yards of sand, which exceeds what OCRM would allow you to do. And that's easy. But it's where is your money best spent, over time when we have these larger projects in the fold. And that's really, a decision for y'all.
Okay.
Jimmy.
Can I ask?
Jimmy, I'll come back to you.
I think you mentioned earlier about trucking in the sand, you would have to close the beach 24/7, correct?
Not 24/7, just during daylight hours when they would be operating, and the city could restrict a contractor to certain hours.
Right.
But essentially, you can estimate a truck about every 7 or 8 minutes would be delivering sand to the beach, and then offloading it at the access. An excavator would load it onto an off-road truck that would then traverse the beach to the site where it was dumped.
Did you mention that the project would take 2 to 3 weeks?
It could take up to that time for the 1,500-foot project.
So if this was passed tonight, you'd be having all the permits, I think I heard correctly, very soon, and you would get started, like?
It would be up to the city to procure the contractor. I've talked to a couple of contractors who could be out here fairly quickly within the next week or two.
With the 232,000, which is now 116, that includes all the material and the contractors and everything?
It's an estimate of 30 yards per foot. So if you get a quote, it may come in higher than that or lower than that. Includes a little bit of engineering to do payment certifications, count trucks and things like that, inspect the bar area that they're going to be taking the sand from. It has to be beach compatible sand.
Well, so it's, you're really not adding to the beach, but you're kind of like putting sand where there is now water at the high tides, the 8-foot tides, and not the 4-foot tides. So if you put in all that's recommended for the full dune restoration, I know it's impossible to answer this, but if we have for sure, but if we have like moon tides or king tide or something, isn't there a possibility it could all just wash away?
Yeah, there's no guarantee on any of this. We are in the
Right.
summertime season.
Right.
And generally, the beach cycle works. In the winter, you have more energetic waves, you have more winds out of the north, and that tends to knock the dunes back and puts more water, puts more sand out in the low tide sandbars. In the summer season, that sand works its way back up the beach. You get more dry beach in the summer. So that's the way it normally works. Now, again, you're around an inlet, so that kind of goes out the window, and also you're going into hurricane season, so a tropical storm. You know, all bets are off with that.
Is it your observation that it is recovering fast enough?
From when we were out here the past 2 weeks, there is a substantial growth of what is close to a dry sand beach. It's not high enough to be dry during spring tides, but there was an intertidal ridge and runnel system, and that ridge has migrated up the beach profile, especially in the 100 to southern 200 block, and has built out a substantial berm there. But during next week's spring tide, it's about a 6.1 predicted tide there, right around the 4th. You know, that's not a huge spring tide. It's not like what we get in the fall.
Right.
But it certainly would cover some of that berm as it exists right now.
Just one last question. I appreciate your time. Just so I'm clear, but if you went with the full dune restoration, you'd have to close the beach from Breach Inlet to wherever the project would end, 5th or 6th Avenue, during the daytime. I mean, the entire beach.
You would have to close, it would be up to the safety personnel with the city to decide what was safe. At low tide, there's probably enough room for equipment to access the beach up near the high tide line, but as the mid tide and up, they would probably want the beach to be closed and it would be a rolling, you know, as they finished one area, they would, they would work back towards the access, so it would reduce over time.
I hate to take up so much time. I really would like to ask if the police chief would care to comment about this. About that low tide, and some of our low tides are, you know, there's plenty of beach, and if they're having equipment on the beach, people can still enjoy the beach?
I think the short answer is we'd have to look at it day by day and kind of see what we're working with.
Okay.
But, you know, if we feel like there's not enough room, and I think for safety reasons, we would shut it down and just let them do their work. And if it looks like we've got a day where we've got a lot of room and people can play, maybe we can find a way to safely keep that cordoned off. That would be what we're judging it by, is can we, not only do they have room to work, but can we leave enough room where people understand that that is not their area to go play in? And as long as we could do that, I don't see any reason we'd have to close it.
It'd be a day-to-day call, right?
I think so, sir. That
Yeah.
would be what I would expect. I
Right.
don't think there's any way for us to know what it would look like each day.
Yeah, and where the tide is.
Correct.
Thank you, that's all I had. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that the costs do not include any other additional police support. We would need to have somebody posted on both sides to restrict access during the construction period, whether it's our own personnel on overtime or off-duty help from other communities.
Gotcha. Jan, and then Scott.
I have some questions for you first, and then some observations about what we're talking about now. First of all, what I'm trying to compare is the minor dune replacement we're talking about for the 1,500 foot berm and the sand scraping. Would the funding, the additional funding that Senator Campson was talking about, would that be available for both alternatives?
That's the question I'd have to ask PRT, who manages that fund.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they would consider, I'm not sure if they can, it's a little outside of what that fund was set up for, these minor type projects.
The scraping?
I think any of these maybe. Now,
Okay.
Senator Kempson, I'm not disagreeing that he says they're available for this project.
Uh-huh.
If they are, then I assume that it would work for either one.
Okay, so you think both of them are sort of in the same category of possible funding? Okay.
And sorry to continue, but I'm not sure how long the process takes to get that funding. That's usually a fairly long, months-long process to get that funding with BRT. There may be a shorter route for a project like this, or there may be a way that they would retroactively reimburse you for the expense.
That's what I'm hoping
But
for.
I'm just not familiar with how they would want to handle that for this project.
Okay. The second thing is the scraping versus the minor dune restoration. It sounds like the scraping would be, we'd probably have a piece of equipment that was out there for months, so that whenever there was a high tide, they could immediately replace the sand where it was needed most. Is that the way it could work?
Scraping could certainly be repeated. It would only take, they could probably do 2 or 3 lots a day with small equipment. They could probably do 10 or more lots a day with larger equipment. But should that dune erode, you could go back and do it again anytime.
It would, just to clarify, it would still have to meet the state regulation of being within 20 feet of the structure.
It would have to erode back to where it was when OCRM approved the emergency permit,
Okay.
or at least very close to it.
Okay. So that question is, it's sort of like you're really continuously working to maintain what would be a minimum out there until we could get the Corps of Engineers project started, I think is where I'm looking at it with that.
If the dune held up, then I think it would, it could certainly last, especially with the, in my opinion, the beach is recovering now. It may take a while to restore the dune and build up a wide dry sand berm. So if you do any of these projects now, I think it has a good chance of lasting. However, weather can change any time. So should either of these alternatives erode, you would have to come back with something else to maintain that dune. And that you could truck in sand now and then come back, and if it's close to that 20 feet again, come back later and scrape. You could retruck. So any of these, I think, have an equal opportunity of performing in similar fashion.
Okay. But the trucking will bring in more sand, and the dune would last longer than the scraping would? Is that?
If you do the full trucking project, then yes, it would bring in more sand because you would be doing a continuous dune. And again, a continuous dune during a storm event has a better chance of persisting because you have a little bit less ends of the dune.
Okay.
If you have discontinuous sections, as a storm will hit, it'll kind of hit the ends of it. I don't think you have much wrapping around, but it will erode the ends of it and just take it lower in the profile.
Okay. The last comment I just wanted to make is, depending upon which one of these options we choose, if it is this dune restoration project, you're saying we are going to have dump trucks every 7 to 8 minutes and coming onto the island. Is that correct?
We did a project a couple of years ago at Edisto Beach that moved 30,000 yards of material onto that beach. It took several months. They averaged anywhere between 50 and 100 trucks per day.
Okay.
Working daylight hours.
Okay, it's going to be a continuous stream across the causeway during the busiest time on our streets, Palm Boulevard and all the avenues to get to the beach and back. They're going to go there and back. So I want everyone to be aware the commitment for this is a serious commitment for the way that our community will be affected during our peak tourism season in the summertime on that end of the island. I don't say it's wrong, I'm just saying we need to make sure that we know what we're committing to when we agree to do this. It may be the best option. I'm thinking it is, if the scraping isn't just a kind of thing where we just are basically responding to this, who's the worst case scenario every day or whatever. But I think it's a hard decision and one that we need to make sure that we commit to completely.
Scott? I don't know where to begin. This is a no-brainer for me. We've got an opportunity to fortify that end of the beach as best as possible and protect our residents' property and also improve the situation as far as public access. Let's not forget about the public access. We keep talking about looking from the beach in to Mr. Streetman's comments. I've got the picture of the rappelling rope that the visitors are using on Access 2A. I tried to get down Access 5A not too long ago and met Shelley Miles out there, and we were both looking off an 8-foot cliff. So this is, when we talk about shutting the beach down for 2 or 3 weeks, the beach access right now is pretty inaccessible in many points. So I think what we've got here is a 2 or 3 week opportunity to get the public back on the beach. That's one of my takes. The second thing is we've got $232,000 we're talking about, and hopefully that's going to be cut in half. We've got probably $232 million worth of property sitting in that 4-block stretch. I can't believe we're even having this conversation. Let's talk about the habitat. There is no habitat for the turtles. It's all been washed away. I think we can try to restore that. You're telling us, I think, Steve, that our best option, our most fortified option is going to be this $116,000, or hopefully $232,000, $116,000 option. We're talking about peanuts here as far as the fund goes. Our fund is replenishing at a rate of probably $200,000 within 2 months. So it's not like we're going to be depleting the fund. It's not like we don't have the funds. Let me go on to a great email that we got from Tim Moody, our brand new planning commissioner, who cited probably 6 different chapters within our own comprehensive plan that talks about beach resiliency and our responsibility to keep this beach renourished for the use of all. Okay, that's another one that, you know, we're talking about doing something I'm not going to say the word, halfway, and we're just ignoring, I think, what our residents have been telling us. The other thing that scares me is we keep talking about what's left in these residents' properties, 70 feet, 40 feet, 80 feet, whatever that number is. I sat there and I've been on Curtis and Carla's porch on 204. I watched 53 feet of their yard disappear within 2 months. I don't want to take that chance. If you subtract 53 feet from any one of these on that chart, we're in a real bad situation. And I don't want to be dealing with that kind of emergency for our residents. So I'm going to ask, please, and plead with the rest of this council, let's just get on with this. Let's vote for this. Let's get the 2 weeks off the plate, off the beach. Let's get these trucks in here, and let's restore this for the residents for all of our island. And let's set precedent. I want to set precedent that if any other part of the island ever faces this, we're not going to sit up here and debate it for 10 hours.
I think we debate it if this council wants to debate it, Scott.
I understand that, but this, I'm just
Katie.
giving you my opinion.
I totally agree with what Scott and John have said, and I think that it's our duty to do what we can to save all of the beach when it needs it. One question for you is, you mentioned, I know vegetation, probably we don't have time, but what about fencing? Does that, assuming we go with the big renourishment, would adding fencing help?
Fencing works well when there's a dry sand beach in front of it to feed it. So I would want, after any of these projects, I want to give it time to see how the beach adjusts. If the tide line's coming right up to the dune toe again, then I wouldn't recommend putting in fencing until there's a wider beach in front of it. It's not going to do you much good.
Okay.
Blair.
I know we're headed towards a vote, and that's fine. I've got some legal questions that I'd like to put to our lawyer before I'm prepared to vote. And so, I would make a motion to go into executive session, and at least ask these questions. We have to do things in a reasoned way because we're spending public money, people. Come on.
For $200 million worth of property.
Yes, that's true, and it's public money, and so we have to do it reasoned, and we can't do things that break the law.
We're not supposed to engage.
Well, and we've got potential lawsuits sitting in front of us that I think we'd like to hear from Mac as well, so we can do executive session.
That's
Say it
my
again.
motion. We have to address this issue specifically. We can come back out and vote it out.
Motion to go into executive session.
Yes, sir.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Other conversation around that?
Let's do a roll call.
All right.
Councilmember Bogosian?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
Aye.
Councilmember Myers?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman?
Aye.
Councilmember Popson?
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pierce?
Aye.
Mayor Pounds?
Aye.
All in favor? I'm off record at
It's 7:53.
7:53.
Thank you.